everyone, and welcome to part 3 in my video series of my self-publishing journey. Today we will be talking about two very crucial steps, the professional edit and the proofread, which is done in two different steps by two different people. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we get into this, I feel the need to address the elephant in the room. I have noticed a bit of a divide within the writing community in regards to the professional edit. So let's just have a brief overview of what an editor actually does. A professional editor is educated not only in things like grammar and literature in general, but is often specialized within a certain genre. The role of the editor is to go through the manuscript word by word and help the author make it as good as it possibly can be for its target audience. I am personally of the opinion that a professional edit is mandatory for a book that is intended for publishing. Some people might disagree with this and think that they themselves are good enough to edit their own manuscripts, and that is their own choice. That is all I'm going to say about that. So that was my tea on that. So, assuming that you've decided to hire an editor, how do you find an editor? Clearly, there is no one way that is correct. There are several ways to do it, but what I did is that I registered on a site called Readsy and hired someone from there. And then based on your sample and other information like the word count of the manuscript, the editor would then send a quote, which you can either accept, decline, or discuss until you find an agreement that works for both of you. It really was so simple. Okay, sorry. Usually, editors will offer a sample edit so that you can see their editing style before choosing someone, and once you've made your choice and set up a collaboration, you then pay them in 2 installments, one payment in advance and another one upon completion. Usually it's 50-50. The pros of using Readsy was that number one, you can feel safe when hiring someone through there, as Readsy acts like a mediator of sorts in regards to payment and any potential conflict. Should you be dissatisfied with the work or the person you hired hasn't followed through with the agreement, then you can get a full refund hassle-free. The second one is that they have a review system so that you can read what other people have said about that particular professional before hiring them. And the third is that all communications, payments and receipts are all gathered on one platform, which just makes everything so much easier, especially if you hire several different professionals for different things. The downside would be that they have a 10% fee which is added on top of the price. If, for example, the professional asks for 500 euros for a project, then the final price would be 550 euros. I personally think this is fair because the pros make it worth it, in my opinion. In case you're wondering, the editor I hired for Leaves of Holly is Nick Hodgson, and I am super pleased with her and would highly recommend her. That being said, it's not always as simple as just hiring an editor. You and the editor will have to come up with a deal that suits your specific needs. When talking about editing, the most common types that you hire someone for are the developmental edit and the line edit, sometimes also called copy edit. The developmental edit focuses on the story and characters as a whole, such as the structure and the pacing of it. It does not require as much time or effort as a line edit, which will go through each and every sentence of the manuscript to make sure that it has a good flow to it and that there are no inconsistencies. If you are uncertain of whether you are ready for a line edit, then you can request only a developmental edit for a lower price. Yeah, like I said, it all depends on your particular needs. What I did was that I got a mix between a developmental edit and a line edit, and that worked really well for me. Now, let's get real here. Having a professional edit your manuscript is incredibly daunting. It is nothing at all like having a critique partner or beta reader where the critique is all bundled together in this nice and fluffy compliment sandwich. Quite the contrary, in fact. Even if you feel like your manuscript is pretty clean, expect to get it back covered in notes and corrections. And they don't just look at grammar and typos, they dive deep into your characters, the world, and story structure. This is not the time for praise on your creativity. They look at it from a professional perspective with the single function to help you improve your manuscript. Meaning that they will highlight the not so good parts. And I think that is where a lot of writers feel a bit iffy. We love our book babies, so of course we hate the idea of having an editor rip it to shreds. And not only that, you can expect to pay a good amount of money for it too. But I will say this, it is called Kill Your Darlings for a reason, and that became really evident once I had implemented the editor's feedback and I read through my manuscript again. And I found it so much more crisp and structured, and overall the flow of the sentences was so much better. Now, the next step is the proofread. After I had gone through my editor's feedback and had done some rewrites where needed, it was time to finalize the manuscript. Because the idea is that once you've had the manuscript proofread, you do not touch it again. Because yes, proofreading is something you pay a professional to do as well, so if you go and meddle in the manuscript after they've done their job, then that is really counterproductive. Again, I would very much like to recommend Reedsy. That is where I hired another editor to do my proofread, more specifically Hannah Close, and I would highly recommend her as well. You might find yourself asking the question, why hire two different people for this? And there's a simple answer to that. Because the editor who does the developmental and line edit of the manuscript will be far too familiar with it to be trusted with a proofread. Because the more familiar you are with a text, the easier it is to miss something. And a good professional will tell you this as well. They would recommend you to hire someone else for the proofread. So yeah, that was my experience hiring an editor and proofreader. As I mentioned earlier, this is just the way that I did it and is by no means the only way. You could also go through Google or just ask among other writer friends or in groups and communities on social media. If you have any questions or thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope to see you back next time when I'll be talking about my experience working with a cover designer.